After a desperate attempt to avoid directing the 2 Hobbit movies,
Mr. Del Toro had to move on.
like Frodo before him, Peter Jackson was the ring bearer.
He didn't want to be there.
It was a burden only he could carry, whether he liked it or not.
You direct it, or we go do it with somebody else.
But with the pressure of 2 films on his shoulders,
Peter was taken ill.
And had to go into hospital. It was very sudden.
Peter had only just taken over the direction of it. They were very behind.
Peter Jackson was pushed to the breaking point, and the news would only get worse.
Philippa and Fran went to Hollywood to chat.
That chat was about to alter the course of the entire project.
There was a rumour going around that they were going to do a trilogy.
Peter Jackson had reluctantly signed on to direct the 2 Hobbit movies. But things weren't going well. A frustrated Peter Jackson had just axed one of the dwarves.
He has to go. You know, and that was it. Gone.
Go away and bother somebody else. There's far too many dwarves in my dining room as it is.
He was cross, and you could tell.
English actor Rob Kaczynski was replaced by New Zealand actor Dino Gorman to play the role of Philly the dwarf. And so, for the other dwarves, including myself, your humble narrator, we had to make some fairly large adjustments.
We'd become friends, all of us. In the end, you know, it's Pete's movie, it's Pete's vision, and he has to be true to that. And it was the right decision.
As the shockwave of this recasting subsided, with a full complement of dwarves, we could at least get back on with making the movie.
A couple of scenes we had to reshoot. But yeah, it was fine, you know.
But something still wasn't quite right.
Yeah, it didn't seem to have that family atmosphere that we had on the original movies.
The atmosphere was also tense back in Hollywood, where the studio was keen to avoid hemorrhaging money and make a profit. Which is, of course, the exact reason why they were making 2 Hobbit movies, and not 1.
There's always pressure from studios. They always want everything done faster, quicker and cheaper.
Come on, give us what you have.
Don't look to me. I have been bled dry.
Yes, but now The Lord of the Rings was a full-blown franchise under new management. Things had changed.
It was more corporate. Yeah, I think so.
Let's just say Warner Brothers, like any major Hollywood studio, had a steely focus on their bottom line.
They're looking at the profit margin and they're looking at how much money they stand to lose if it doesn't do well.
What have I seen for my investment?
10 years on, there was more concern about those aspects than there were about giving Peter the freedom to make the films that he might have ended up making.
But it appeared that the studios were making decisions based less from a Tolkien text and more from box office figures.
Hunger Games had come out, and suddenly, the powers that be in Hollywood realized, wow, powerful young women could really, we could, that pack them in.
It does make the film feel much more grounded in the moment it was made.
Hollywood must have said, there's not enough female roles.
A brand new character had been written into the story. Tauriel, the captain of the Elven Guard, an elf of exquisite grace and beauty who could also rival Legolas as a supreme orc butt-kicker.
I'm Ingrid Kleinig, and I doubled Evangeline Lilly, who played Tauriel in The Hobbit.
But unlike the strong female roles in the original trilogy, Tauriel was absent from the pages of Tolkien's work.
I know that that was particularly contentious at the time, especially amongst Hobbit aficionados who were like, there is no character called Tauriel in the books. What are you doing? You're ruining it. But it was a very male-centric cast.
It was such a rigorous, specific role that it wasn't just the dwarf department who'd suffered losses. the axe swung for the elves as well.
They had, I believe, been through 2 stunt doubles for Evangeline already. That didn't work out.
And at her audition, Ingrid found out why.
I think they tried to break me, physically and mentally. A lot of fight choreography to learn in a very short amount of time that then had to be filmed and presented to the grown-ups, including Evangeline for approval. I know they were looking at some other people as well.
Ingrid nailed the audition and joined the cast.
I was told Tauriel was a female elven warrior. I didn't know how important she was to the script, that she was the only real sort of female character. I didn't know any of that. I was just fighting orcs, a lot of them, a lot of the time. Evangeline was clear that she wanted this character to be strong, but in a feminine way.
It seemed like the entire production had a different take on exactly how strong should look.
Evangeline was that sort of tiny person. I mean, petite and lovely, but it so easily, completely like swamped if you weren't too careful. And there was a concept art drawing that Weta had done that Peter liked, and it was a beautiful drawing, but proportionally it was for somebody who was 6'2". She just didn't have the leg length or the body length to accommodate this drawing, which looked great on paper. So we did go through a few traumas with that, I guess. And eventually Peter just decided to go with this like tiny pencil sketch that I'd done. Practically overnight, the whole lot came back to us to do. And then we were in a bit of a rush to do those elves.
And it didn't stop there. Evangeline and Ingrid both had to wear an incredibly long wig throughout the entirety of the filming.
The wig, beautiful, completely impractical. It sort of came down to my calves. The whole premise behind Tauriel's movement was that it was sort of spiraling. It was always spiraling, so winding and unwinding like a corkscrew. I remember a lot of takes of just her getting wound up. It's, you know, with those double daggers as well, just like this, you know, you just get caught up in hair and there's nothing you can do and there's nowhere you could get out of it. All right, going again for hair. Not to mention wire rigs. Action! So you've got wires going everywhere and you're sort of trying to flip around and the wig's getting caught in the wires. Just, I don't know why a warrior would have hair like that. It was an interesting challenge.
This is the thing of when men are in charge. It's like women would know better.
Ridiculous. Utterly ridiculous and impractical in every sense of the word. I just don't. Anyway, it was beautiful.
But Peter Jackson was untangling his own challenges and putting out fires wherever he went, not least on the colossal Lake Town set.
The designers and the carpenters had built the roof, which was sitting on the floor of the studio with a green floor, so that the orcs and the people fighting them could go over these rooftops without them being seriously high. Some of them had been fitted with hinges and hydraulics even, so that roofs would crash in on each other. And I remember one day Peter going in and having a look at a run-through of the battle scene, and then he said he wanted to see it a second time. And then he said, yeah, it doesn't work for me.
Peter won't rush things, going, this could be more dynamic, this could be more whatever. No, I'm not happy, because it wasn't dangerous enough.
To increase the sense of danger, Jackson now wanted to shoot from above on a huge set designed for shooting from below.
He wanted the camera to be able to come in above, not underneath.
Peter Jackson was literally turning his cast and crew's world upside down.
We had a day off shooting other stuff while they completely rebuilt the set, so you could take the roof off and film from above.
It was a tricky time when things like that happened.
But for Jackson, the fires only got bigger, wetter, and colder.
We got taken up to, we're at the Pelorus River in the South Island.
That's so much fun.
We get stood on this promontory, looking out, and Pete sort of goes, "Stunty, if you can come around." And so the stuntman, you see a stuntman come around the corner, and he's got a crash helmet on, first of all, and he's paddling in this barrel, right? And then he gets to this small beach, and he does a sort of scuba roll back out into the water, and then walks out. And we're all like, fantastic. That was so good, well done. And we're looking around for all our stunt doubles, you know. And Pete just said, "So, shall we shoot it?" Us, right? And then we were literally led, like lambs to the slaughter, down to this tiny area where all our barrels were waiting for us.
Floating in barrels along one of New Zealand's most historic and powerful rivers. What could possibly go wrong?
They had barrels with a keel, a steel keel, and then we had rubber tubing inside to keep us afloat.
We're in our laughingly called pajamas, which are these sort of dwarvish big woolen numbers with our massive boots.
Those poor guys in those dwarf suits, you know, they had reticulated foam suits on, got all the prosthetics, and then you've got to try and physically get them in a barrel.
Hold your breath.
Hold my breath.
Even if the fit was a bit snug.
Stephen Hunter, who of course was Bomber, who had the biggest costume and the heaviest, had to be rammed into it like a cork.
They had safety wires underneath the water to try and guide us into a certain place, but 2 of the barrels went outside of that. 2 of the actors started disappearing downriver. It's a real river. There are waterfalls and there are rapids downriver.
And they had to send a speedboat, basically, to catch them.
Oh, goody!
But soon, rogue dwarves in barrels would be the least of our concerns. Filming on the South Island's Pelorus River had come to a standstill.
In the hills, the mountains behind where we were shooting, there had been a storm. The police arrived and said we had to move on.
New Zealand has some of the world's most changeable weather.
We're suddenly told we have an hour to clear everything out, and everyone's going, what? And to protect everything, they always build these huge structures of scaffolding and stuff.
It was time to pack out or be washed out by the coming flood.
Huge numbers of scaffolding pipes bolted together with platforms, tents, with costume, wardrobe, camera gear, sound gear, and one for the coffee, of course. That was very important. They had fabulous coffee throughout the entire shoot.
But the coffee would be cold brewed in glacial river water if the operation didn't evacuate to higher ground immediately.
And so we packed up, we got all the crew and the cast out of there.
And suddenly, within an hour, and there was virtually like a tidal wave. It was a torrent, it was barreling down. We would have all been 10 feet underwater.
Indeed, some of the set was.
A lot of the scaffolding that was set up for the set and for the cameras to go on ended up getting washed down the river.
This scene had just gone from being extremely hard to shoot to impossible.
So what they did was they decided they would build the river in a studio.
Yes, you heard that right. Peter was going to build a river.
In a studio.
Right. There was, however, an extra problem.
They didn't have a studio free.
Luckily,
Peter owned an old car factory, a place called Trentham.
Trentham was an old General Motors building that Weta Digital had been renting as storage space.
So they built this entire river.
They built rocks and things in the middle, and they became an island. They put in gates and things. It was just amazing how they put it all together.
The homemade river even had on-demand rapids, courtesy of
2 V8 engines at 5,000 RPM at each end.
These huge dump tanks to make it look like the waterfalls.
Oh, that was the washing machine. It was insane. And because it was so turbulent, it really was. I'd be going, get another moustache, that one's gone. We did lose a wig in there somewhere. Someone's wig came off, we never found it.
We spent a couple of weeks in the water having fun. Very hard to get dwarves to look scared when they're like on a Disneyland ride.
It was a little bit like a sort of a theme park ride, because all these things were bobbing about all over the place.
Aidan Turner especially could not stop laughing. He just thought it was such, and Peter kept having to say, Aidan, it's not funny, you're being attacked by orcs. And he was like, yeah, but it's so much fun.
Well done, Master Baggins.
There was one day Martin Freeman had spent all day in the water, and he sort of said offhand, he said, has anybody actually got out to go number ones? And we're like, no. We've all just sat in the water all day. Of course we had, but we didn't want him to know that. Because he was such a prankster, it was nice to get a prank back over on him.
This rollicking, waterlogged sequence was just the thing we needed.
The barrels were, when I look back, such a bonding experience for everybody.
Really, really rewarding work to do.
It was a lot of fun, despite all the madness.
Went home exhausted, day after day, couldn't wait for the next.
While the first unit was finally on track, the second unit was being helmed by a director who needed no introduction.
That was an amazing thing to have Andy Serkis come back. It kind of felt like getting the gang back together.
And Andy Serkis would also reprise his role as Gollum.
He understands what it takes on both sides of the camera.
He really understands how to get under actors' skins.
And Andy was really good at getting a character performance out of his cast.
Why are you whispering down?
He's the actor's director and such a joy to work with.
Like Peter, he likes actors to do as much of the physicality as possible, so he really pushes people.
Sylvester McCoy learned that the hard way.
There was another scene where Andy Serkis was filming. He was deputy director at that time, and they put me on a sledge. I was up high on a big rubber ring, and then on that they covered it in green, and then the floor was covered in green, and everything was covered in green. I was riding along on a sledge fighting orcs that were attacking me, but there was nothing there. And there were two green men, and those green men were shaking this thing, and I was on it. And at my age, I had to hang on to the sledge. Andy said to me, do more, like that. A double takes. And I double took so much, I flew off this height on to the floor. Now, normally that wouldn't have been too bad because there was padding under the floor as well. But they'd taken the padding away because they wanted to get a camera angle much lower. And I flew down and my bum hit the ground, the concrete, and I really felt it. And then my head as well hit the concrete. As luckily being in New Zealand, where they are some of the best rugby players in the world, there was a rugby player there, and he dived and caught my head before the full force of it. And, otherwise I might be knocked out or, who knows, concussed or dead.
Oh, perhaps someone should call a doctor.
I was in Doctor Who,
Jackson had proven that his team could build anything to get the practical effects he wanted, and he had a cast willing to do whatever was asked of them.
Just get used to it.
However, there was something he just couldn't achieve in the flesh.
A lot of my stuff that I did on The Hobbit actually had to be lost because of the problems we had. It was with the second actor they had playing Azog.
Stephen actually played two characters in the movies, a goblin called Grinner and an orc called Fimble.
Shot quite a few scenes before they realised that they needed to make a change in the casting of that character.
That character was the orc Azog, and the actor playing him was about to lose his job. The character Azog was another that was expanded on for the movie. But finding the right actor to play this giant orc was proving very tough.
They realised that they needed to make a change in the casting of that character. The casting wasn't right for the first couple of times.
The problem was that the actors trying to portray the enormous Azog were human.
I sort of remember the day where it became apparent that we were never going to be able to make this a physical thing. They're massive, massive guys, and I saw quite a few different versions of them where they're trying to make it work. But it was just too hard.
It's very difficult to get them to create this, like Azog's size and his menacing. They got someone who was really big, but it just wasn't working for Peter.
Even the biggest men in the industry just weren't up to it.
Some of the performers were monster men, but then quite often couldn't move in the way that was needed.
Peter Jackson decided the only way to get the giant orc to fight the way he needed was via motion capture and CGI effects.
There are things that you can do with mocap actors in terms of battle scenes, in terms of, you know, the viscerality and the fighting stuff that you can do that you can't do with real people. It's just too dangerous, or you're just not getting the performance you want.
You want to do things practically, you want to shoot them practically, and there comes a point at which, both for the sake of shooting and also because of pressures that you're getting for how things look, you end up moving to CG.
Azog the Defiler would be reborn inside a 3D wireframe. But for Stephen's orc character Fimble, it was the most brutal cut of all.
A lot of the stuff I did just didn't make it up onto the screen on that. It was very, very disappointing.
Along with the advances in computer-generated animation, the super high frame rate and 3D filming techniques, the two Hobbit movies were shaping up to be potentially quite different from the original trilogy. However, the films would soon have something very much in common.
It was only in the halfway through or near the end of the second film that Philippa and Fran went to Hollywood to chat.
That chat was about to alter the course of the entire project.
The more they started to expand things, the more the studio started to think about it in terms of money.
Money that multiple studios had a stake in, but only for the first Hobbit movie.
If we succeed, all will share in the wealth of the mountain.
Certain studios had a stake in the first film, like they would get a shared profit in the first film, but if they made additional films, there wasn't something set up for them to have a profit. So there was an incentive there of, if we make 2 or 3, then we could recoup some of our funding back and make more of a profit.
And soon there were whispers in the wind.
There was sort of a little rumour going around that they were going to do a third.
We all went, ooh, and kept our fingers crossed. And they came back, and there was another one.
We were as shocked as anybody. I mean, I was so happy because it meant another film, right?
Like its predecessor, The Hobbit was growing.
There's too many of these buggers, Thorin.
It didn't make any difference to us. We were still going to film the content. Just things just kept getting added.
It might only be a small book, but yeah, we weren't making a book. We were making films, and there was certain license there.
So the battle between studios became the Battle of the Five Armies.
And that was the main issue from the get-go with The Hobbit, and why it eventually became a trilogy.
Peter Jackson, the man who didn't want to direct one Hobbit film, suddenly found himself in charge of 3.
As a movie, maybe a single movie, it works as a very simple children's story. But the moment you start to blow it out at all, structurally, it's a weird story. It doesn't really work as a 3-act structure in a typical sense.
So when we did learn that there was going to be a third one, we were all going, well, how's that going to work? So he took chunks and moved them out.
These films start radically changing on the fly.
I think the first film finished at the end of the barrel scene when we leave. We escape from the elves.
But now that a third film was being created, Peter had to figure out how to end films 1 and 2.
There was a fairly aggressive reworking of material during the editing process on 1 and 2, I believe. The idea of even what the shape of 3 was is something that really didn't come into focus until later in that process. It's really a crazy way to try and make giant movies.
Suddenly the deck chairs were being rapidly rearranged.
You had to be able to be nimble and think on your feet. And so maybe he's one of the few guys who could do that and survive.
And with release dates looming, the battle of the 3 movies was just beginning.
I think fans were already on edge because stretching this into 3 films was always looked at as a cash grab.
The winds of change blew through the production.
Changing. It was, felt a lot more sort of like pressure.
Confirmation of a third film in the Hobbit series was met with skepticism in some quarters.
Felt a lot more guerrilla filmmaking than Rings, for sure.
And while the filmmaking was guerrilla style, when it came to the stunts, it was more monkey business.
It was usually us that were doing these ridiculously physical things.
As I discovered when we did this scene.
On action, we have to leap into the air, grab the top of the boom, and pull ourselves up to escape the molten gold. And so they arranged these 3 booms that we had to leap onto. And they were at different heights. And I'm like, why? Why are they giving the 50-year-old guy the one that's highest off the ground? I jump, I grab it, and I pull myself up. Something popped on my elbow. Adrenaline can get you so far, but eventually your body just goes, no. You better not think of doing that twice.
It really bloody hurt, actually. Although John, who's considerably older than me, was really throwing himself around.
Okay, John, there's a stack of stunt mats here. You're going to run up there and do a shoulder roll over them and go down the other side, very carefully choreographed. So I ran at this stack and I thought, I'm not going to get over it. So I just found myself running into this stack. And I thought, this is ridiculous. If they're shooting this, they don't want me dicking about. So I made a real effort, raced like mad towards it, rolled beautifully, but then realized I'd thrown myself too far over the mats, flipped and missed the mats on the floor, hit the concrete floor, and I really thought I had broken my ankle. I just wrapped it up, I had ice on it, and I kept it wrapped up. It just hurt like hell the whole day.
Ah, he's a trooper, isn't he? But as the film hobbled into post-production, some unexpected problems started to arise.
The Hobbit was high frame rate, HDR, stereo.
Stereo meant stereoscopic shooting for 3D. HDR meant enhanced contrast, and a higher frame rate aimed to improve smoothness and 3D imaging.
Well, they talked about it, and it went over my head. I have no idea what they were talking about, really.
They were talking about changing a technological standard that had been around for more than 80 years.
We were doing 48 frames a second, and normally it's 24, 25. He actually wanted to do 72 frames a second, but it was going to be too expensive.
First impressions of a doubled frame rate suggested those numbers looked better on paper than they did on screen.
It leaves you with kind of a different taste in your mouth, right? And Peter's whole thing was, people will get used to it. They'll get used to it.
But that was assuming fans would even see the upscaled format at their local theaters, which were designed for regular film.
Warner Brothers' reaction was, what theater in the world is going to play this? And Peter said, I have 2 of them, one at my house and one at Weta.
That was fine for movie moguls, but movie theaters would need upgrades costing from $1,200 to $20,000.
Couldn't bring it to every single person.
The Hobbit was an ambitious project, but expecting cinema's very infrastructure to bend to its will was a lofty goal.
People in Hollywood Boulevard got to see it, but I don't think in Iowa.
Well, The Hobbit, an unexpected journey, now more aptly named than ever, had its world premiere in Wellington in November of 2012.
Oh, I didn't realize it was actually the world premiere.
Being in Wellington for the release of the first one was just mind-blowing.
They had the longest red carpet in history in Wellington.
A tradition started on The Lord of the Rings.
And we walked, several city blocks with all these tens of thousands of people.
It just looked very similar to Lord of the Rings, the same feel, same look.
Well, actually, the look was quite different. But few cared about frame rates at the premiere.
It was so exciting.
Least of all, Sylvester, who couldn't wait to get his first glimpse of his hero scene.
I had a hedgehog to bring back to life, and I was stuffed hedgehog. I remember thinking, I'm going to be the only person here, there's no other actors. Wait till my son see this would be brilliant. It's not as if it's witchcraft. And the scene comes up, and it's so exciting. And now my son, this is it. And suddenly, the wizards of Weta had got hold of the hedgehog and made it alive and turned it into this beautiful little thing. And everybody's looking at the hedgehog, and no one's looking at me. Upstaging little blackguard.
No one's 100% sure what happened to that hedgehog. And when the movie hit the cinemas, not everyone was as excited as Sylvester.
Fans were not as happy about The Hobbit as they were about Lord of the Rings. And some of that, I think, is baked in. You know, when you do your first trilogy and it's great, it's going to be really hard to equal or top that.
The overall general consensus of The Hobbits, people love Martin Freeman. People love the scene with him and Gollum.
Blesses and splashes, precious. That's a meaty mouthful.
A lot of CGI mess that sometimes looked really cheap and fake.
A problem only exacerbated by Peter Jackson's newfangled high frame rate.
It was almost unwatchable. It was crazy, and audiences recoiled from it.
I actually felt myself like physically recoiling in some of those scenes with a high frame rate. It was very uncomfortable to watch, and it made me feel like my eyes were being tricked, and then I started to get headaches.
Cinema goers had a bewildering choice of alternative formats. IMAX 2D, IMAX 3D, standard 3D, and good old regular 2D. But the damage was done.
With that high of a frame rate, everything looked really cheap.
On screen, you got Martin Freeman, high frame rate, who looks like an old BBC production or that like someone videotaped a stage play.
Makeup looked like makeup. All of a sudden you had a clarity that ruined the illusion.
It cheapened the production quality where once it was impressive.
It did not work. It was one of those things where 3D, I think, had its big proof of concept with Avatar, and all of a sudden everybody wanted 3D movies. I think the reaction to high frame rate was a giant ugh, and audiences did not want more of it.
Well, that could have been worse.
But more was coming. Much more.
You've got to be joking!
The indisputable star of the second Hobbit movie, The Desolation of Smaug, would be the dragon himself.
Do you think flattery will keep you alive?
Well, it's always worth a try. Peter needed a strong voice to bring the gold-loving dragon to life. So he opted for not just another doctor, but the world's greatest detective, reuniting Sherlock and Watson in, albeit rather more dank, circumstances.
Benedict Cumberbatch, he was offended because a lot of interviewers would say, when you supplied the voice for the dragon, it's like, no, I did much more than supply the voice.
Well, he also supplied the body.
He studied, like, how would a dragon move? I really don't know how he did that research.
Perhaps it is time I paid them a visit.
Like Andy Serkis before him, Benedict Cumberbatch was by no means phoning it in.
Just the commitment in terms of physically, him crawling around the floor like a worm.
It was not just motion capture, but emotion capture.
It really helped create and define those characters. It wasn't just technicians animated the character.
Pretty extraordinary.
Impressive.
Benedict's was the enthusiasm of an actor fresh to his role. But 3 films deep on The Hobbit, the cast and crew were flagging.
When we came back to do the final battle, I felt like we were just kind of trying to get blood from a stone at that stage.
What are you doing?
The final film, The Battle of the Five Armies, would prove to be a war on 2 fronts for the production.
We cannot go back.
As it stretched into that third film and they took shape as a trilogy, the production was a much longer production than originally envisioned.
The first front was practical, very practical. Devising new scenes to fill a third movie, Jackson's schedule was growing as crowded and chaotic as a battlefield.
There were definitely days where we wouldn't get to stuff, or there had been a rewrite, and so that scene wasn't going to be shot in the same way.
The second front would be digital. Weta Digital would marshal its own small army to give the 5 armies cinematic scale. Or, as the studio requested,
a little more fighting and a little less emotion and talking.
Who's in charge here?
For the actors on the front line, it sometimes felt like they were lost in no man's land.
Peter has Weta digital. He has the ability to do whatever he wants. So I guess if you are not seeing that and you don't necessarily have that vision, then can be a little daunting.
In the theatre of motion capture, the battlefield was green and the enemy was invisible.
The Battle of the Five Armies felt like it was more motion capture than anything else, with real-time stuff thrown in there.
But the actual filming of it was actually one of the most enjoyable parts.
The Battle of the Five Armies would be a battle of a different kind for one of its biggest stars.
Would you consider just starting off?
Billy Connolly had been cast as the dwarf Dane Ironfoot and was clearly enjoying himself.
We could hear Billy Connolly laughing as he's sitting on this giant pig.
But the Scottish comedian had been diagnosed with Parkinson's, and his illness was beginning to impact filming.
The lines, he just kept forgetting them. It was a real shame. He sort of couldn't do it through no fault of his own. I got the feeling he was really embarrassed and felt for him.
Peter loved Billy in the role and refused to recast. So they recorded all of Dane's dialogue and then created a fully digitalized version of the character. And with Jackson running out of time, the digital front would have to be where the Battle of the Five Armies was decided.
I think Peter always imagined that we would come back. He certainly said at the wrap party, "I'll see you all next year." I think that he thought we would all come back and actually shoot the Battle of the Five Armies properly, because it was rushed towards the end.
For the cast, a long assignment had finally come to an end. The closing chapter in a personal odyssey as epic as Tolkien's stories.
My last day, I was doing a fight sequence. At the end of it, it was a cut, and Pete came over. And I knew it was going to be a big moment, you know. But I just completely broke down. I mean, I was sobbing on his shoulder.
Yeah, it was fun. It was a great scene to end on. Yeah.
Oh, I knew I'd get like this. Oh dear. And Pete was just going, "Oh no, it's okay. You'll be all right. Don't worry." And I was gonna be. And so that was really a beautiful memory for me. You know, in those 3 films, training days, days of filming. All of those they stand out like little islands of joy in it all. And there were a lot of islands. It was a little archipelago of joy for 2.5 years.
When I finished doing it, my last scene, and Peter made this lovely speech about working, and he did this with everyone, the last scene. And he said, turned to everyone and said, "It was great working with Sylvester," he said, "because I got to work with Doctor Who." He was a big Doctor Who fan. And he kept that quiet for 3 years.
When the final installment of The Hobbit premiered in December of 2014, the world now had nearly 8 hours worth of Hobbit movies to enjoy.
I think if fans already go in knowing you're stretching this into 3 films, you've already got a strike against you when you start.
And it is the storytelling. And I think so much of the storytelling in the second trilogy absolutely smacks of studio requirements.
I didn't see any reason why it should have been 3 films other than the studios just wanted to make money.
Don't underestimate the evil of gold.
I don't think The Hobbit is a case of it got taken from him so much as he went into it thinking, I'm making this for the studio.
But whatever worked for the studio creatively ultimately worked for them financially too.
Gold beyond measure.
They still did well at the box office.
So it's like obviously the public liked them too.
The Hobbit series made nearly the same at the box office as the Lord of the Rings trilogy, despite a muted critical reaction.
But they're not held in the same esteem as the Lord of the Rings movies.
I don't know anybody who has the same sort of emotional connection to them that I have come across time and time again with Lord of the Rings. I feel like The Hobbit is a giant experiment that, at best, remains a great curiosity at the end of this other thing.
6 films, nearly $9 billion in box office takings, 25 Oscars, and an uncountable number of fans had made Lord of the Rings and the Hobbit trilogies a success as big as J.R.R. Tolkien's imagination.
Peter Jackson's epic films were an amazing accomplishment, right? How could you do justice to a fantasy story like that?
Because Jackson and his team had achieved the impossible.
I didn't think that the book could be adaptable.
This is the greatest adventure story there's ever been. There's so many creatures, and there's dragons, and there's hobbits, and there's skin changers and spiders.
It took one very special visionary to realize the vision of another.
The way in which he has created this open door into Middle-earth for his viewers is, I think, the biggest and longest-lasting legacy of the Lord of the Rings films.
Few films set out to change the industry, but The Lord of the Rings and the Hobbit trilogies did just that.
They were a proof of concept for so many different things, and so many filmmakers have taken up the challenge that Peter Jackson laid down since then.
We were doing something very special that was being invented as we went along. There were no bounds to the imagination or the concept of what could be made on screen.
It definitely was a game changer in terms of cinematic progression.
They have much to be grateful for.
I think that made other studios, other filmmakers realize what was possible.
James Cameron, for instance, went and saw The Two Towers and thought, ha! The technology now exists for me to make my Avatar film.
Where would you be without me?
I think a lot of the technology that we use today owes a lot to that time.
By recreating Hollywood in the South Pacific,
Called it Wellywood. Peter never liked that name, so it never stuck.
Peter Jackson, along with his partner Fran Walsh.
Fran is Peter's #1 sounding board. It was a great collaboration. She was central to it.
The perfect yin to Peter's yang. She's a great presence, and we're a great team.
They had not only changed the industry, they had created a new one.
Everybody said fantasy was passé when we started Lord of the Rings. Everybody said you couldn't make this movie in New Zealand. And we proved everybody wrong.
He created companies there.
Making Weta Digital, Park Road Post.
Created, sound stages and visual effects companies, prop companies.
And thousands of jobs for his fellow Kiwis.
Half the country worked on those movies.
It's really is part of, New Zealand movie history.
Let us together rebuild this world.
Now Hollywood comes to us in New Zealand. They use our locations and our crew and our studios because they're some of the best in the world. That wouldn't have happened without Lord of the Rings.
It did have a big impact, not just on the film industry, but on the whole nation.
The impact of the trilogies actually altered an entire nation's fortunes.
Peter put our country on the map.
He's our greatest champion.
New Zealand is kind of known as Middle-earth.
What I love is that Lord of the Rings is woven through so many people's lives, and actually, even just saying that, I'm actually getting chills down my spine.
A tale handed down from one visionary to another, and embraced by the cast and crew on this unexpected but brilliant journey.
Doing The Hobbit was extraordinary.
I just feel privileged to have worked on it.
What a gift to have done Middle-earth for as many years as I did.
I do remember thinking, wow, this is a film that I'm going to be able to tell my grandchildren about, and they'll know what it is.
It's a happy Hollywood ending.
I mean, you have to say, once upon a time I was in Lord of the Rings,